In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Bryan Fry, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbardis, Nathan Lutz, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome, all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm your host, Dustin Melbardis, and joining me today for several times in a row together, you and I, my good friend, Chad Robinson. How are you today?
I feel like the Turtles song was just playing there, so happy together.
I can't, for real. We are, the two of us, for briefly there, I was, again, turned into a Chad, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. We had two Chads, and they were bringing me into the Chad fold.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm back to myself, just the two of us, and we are lucky to have a guest. And
Awesome.
Our guest today is Andres Morell-Pacheco. Say hi.
Hi there, everybody.
Coming in today to help us talk about Born on the 4th of July from 1989. Andres, you were the one that pointed us in this direction of this movie. What was on your mind when you were saying, let's tackle this?
Well, I would say I'm a fan of the war movie genre. There's a lot to be taken out of it, especially for pieces that were done about movies, the conflicts during the 20th century. And I like to think that the one that we chose for today is a pretty remarkable standout of that genre.
Remarkable indeed. Before we get into that movie, I would like to ask you, Andres, what was the last movie you saw before this?
I watched Hell House LLC, which is a horror movie.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool, an interesting take on the found footage kind of documentary style horror film. And there was just a lot of really interesting devices that were used in the film, and the setting was really cool. And so, yeah,
It's one of my favorite found footage movies, right up there with like rare exports, things like that.
I would say I'm kind of a discerning horror enjoyer. I spend a lot more time looking for horror movies that I think are worthwhile than actually watching horror movies, which means I don't actually watch a whole lot of horror movies.
Whereas I think, Chad, you do the opposite, which is that as soon as a blip hits your radar, you are tuning in.
Yes, I am completely not discriminating at all. In fact, the last film I watched, it was a horror movie with Fred Armisen in it. So let that marinate for a second. The film's called Too Late. It's about a comedy club owner and his assistant helps feed the owner people. He eats people. So take that as you will.
Well, I guess I actually watched something that is maybe horror adjacent. I was really into a Danny Elfman soundtrack from one of the last movies that Chad and I worked together on, which was To Die For. And I was thinking that it was reminding me of the Beetlejuice soundtrack, so I just went ahead and rewatched it.
But how many times did you say it?
I am always extremely careful with that. I'm not going to tempt that. I'm definitely not going to tempt Candyman either. But yeah, not too scary of a movie, but a great one. And a favorite of mine. And speaking of favorites, as far as a war movie, what would be one of your favorites, Andres?
Saving Private Ryan is probably the movie that I was the first one I saw that really stuck with me. I've seen a lot of other war movies in my life, and I think I saw others before that just didn't impact me the same way, but Saving Private Ryan was a really good mixture of really great cinematography, storytelling, the special effects and practical effects were really fantastic. The acting, going back and watching that movie, I've seen it a couple times, and I didn't realize how many A-list actors were actually hiding in the woodwork without me realizing that they were actually famous the entire time.
As will happen.
Yeah, Vin Diesel was the one that I was the most surprised about. That actually, Saving Private Ryan is probably not what he's best known for these days.
Outrunning submarines with John Cena.
Precisely.
What else was he involved in?
Chronicles of Riddick, man. Great
Chronicles of
movie.
Riddick. Pitch Black is great. I do like Pitch Black. I think he does the voice of Groot in the Guardians of the Galaxy series.
He does. He also does The Last Witch Hunter based on his D&D character, so there's that.
Oh, I didn't know he played D&D. That's pretty cool.
John Flack, who used to, he's been on this podcast quite a bit, he would put on Platoon, another Oliver Stone, so we would see that a lot. Glory, though, I really like Glory. I'm in American history. I hold a master's degree in it. So, yeah, this hits the Civil War, Matthew Broderick. It's very touching. It's close enough to the truth. It's not like Mel Gibson Patriot, although I still kind of defend that. That's fun.
The Ghost.
It's fun. It's just really, really wrong. Yeah, Glory is my favorite.
It also includes one of my favorite characters in film, who is Colonel Tavington,
Yes.
the dragoon in The Patriot. And you know what? I didn't
Bannister
think about
Tarleton. Yeah.
that. That's tell me about Ohio. I love that scene. Love that guy. I like that movie a lot, but it is not my favorite war movie. Mine is one that I watched a whole lot. Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, is that a required movie for like late nights? I saw that almost every single time I'd stay over with someone.
I think it is. It kind of depends on your friend group, but for us it was, and most that means I've seen the first, we'll say third of it 100 times as opposed to the whole movie a dozen times, because you start it and then you fall asleep. I will revisit that one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a movie I probably need to revisit, because I only have fleeting impressions of it, because I think I might have seen it in high school a couple times under similar circumstances that you described, Dustin. It wasn't something that I really paid attention to much, but it was kind of in my wheelhouse, just because it was a Kubrick and a little bit edgy, which that's Kubrick's signature.
I think Russell's actually attested to what you've said, Dustin. I want to say Russell has joked with me that he's never seen the second half of this movie. Like, we would always fall asleep pretty much as soon as they went to Vietnam.
Yeah. Maybe hard to say, easier to fall asleep to. We're talking about a war movie, but apparently that's what happened with us. Vietnam War movie. Let's talk about Born on the 4th of July. It is starring Tom Cruise, Kira Sedgwick, Raymond J. Barry, Jerry Levine, Frank Whaley, and Willem Dafoe. Released in 1989, it grossed a little over $70 million. It was the 17th in the box office that year. It had placed just behind Turner and Hooch and just ahead of Uncle Buck.
It's such a weird sandwich.
It's a contrast sandwich right there.
Number one movie that year was Batman, which deserves it, clearly. But I would say that there were three movies that stood out, aside from Turner and Hooch and Uncle Buck, is number 4 and number 5, respectively. Look Who's Talking and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Hey, Rick Moranis was hot back then.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking to myself, we've got Look Who's Talking, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Turner and Hooch, Uncle Buck. I don't know if those movies sniff the top 10 today. The idea that these movies were so high at that time was kind of surprising to me looking back. Especially Look Who's Talking. I did not realize how popular.
John Travolta.
It'd be like telling me Baby's Day Out was in the top 10.
The most referenced obscure movie of all time in this podcast.
Number 2 that stood out was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which is my favorite Indiana Jones.
I will second that. I think that's both my favorite as well.
Beaten by Batman. Huh.
Beaten by Batman.
Settles the debate. Batman wins against Indy.
I don't know if that ever really should have been a debate, truly. But I think the other one that really stood out to me there for that year, for 89, was when you think about how big Disney movies are now. and how a Disney movie or a Pixar movie is going to just make so much money. The Little Mermaid came out that year, and I know that that's a favorite of many. It was 13th in the box office, beaten by Look Who's Talking and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
I think that's a pretty remarkable observation. I can't even fathom a world in which the Disney juggernaut doesn't break the box office every time they release a new animated feature of some sort.
Well, as far as Born on the 4th of July, it has a 7.2 out of 10 IMDb rating. Rotten Tomatoes, the critics give it an 85%. The audience gives it 76%. Several Academy Award nominations: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Screenplay based on material from another medium, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound. And it did win for Best Director for Oliver Stone and Best Film Editing for David Brenner and Joe Hushing. At the Golden Globe, the 4 that it was nominated for, it won. Best Motion Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Screenplay. But, these were all awards, I think, worthy. I think we all knew that it had the accolades. But Andres, had you seen this movie before?
No, I hadn't. It was something that had kind of flown around in my recommendations from here or there for a while, and I finally sat down to watch it for this program, and I was really blown away.
We don't get that often. My last Dealer's Choice was a movie that I purposefully had not seen before, and you hadn't seen this either. Chad, had you, and were you expecting anything coming into it?
I hadn't, and you just gave me far too much credit about knowing the accolades and everything else. So, peek behind the curtain here, was given this list, and at the time I was watching a Willem Dafoe movie, and I saw Willem Dafoe was on Born on the 4th of July. Like, you know what? Let's do that. No other research or consideration went into this movie, so completely blindsided by it. I had no expectations. I was sort of expecting, I guess, Platoon once I found out it was Oliver Stone and set in Vietnam. This is not Platoon. They're not in Vietnam very long. It's a reverse Full Metal Jacket. You're in Vietnam for like the first, 20 minutes, and then you're back. So yeah, this was a new experience for me, and I'm excited to talk about it.
And how excited were you after an hour and 40 minutes to say, oh, hey, there's Willem Dafoe?
Yeah. Is this a Gary Oldman thing? Is he like a chameleon here? And I just I don't think he can hide his face. And then, yeah, it did take an hour. Said, oh, there he is.
Yeah, there he is.
I showed up in a big way, for sure.
Memorable part, for sure.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, I knew it had accolades, but I did not know what this movie was about. And I think if, unless you had it recommended to you or somebody were to tell you about it, this movie really takes you on a journey.
When I sat down to watch this movie, I would say that I was under the expectation that I had a vague idea about the contents of the movie, and so I was kind of looking at all the way towards the beginning to see what kind of context Oliver Stone was going to give.
As soon as we left Vietnam, I expected to be there quite a bit more and have more context. It's like, oh, this movie, not like Vietnam was a happy place, but this movie's going to spend the next, whatever it was, hour and 40 minutes just depressing the heck out of me, isn't it?
Well, I would say, yeah, I think there's definitely a really distinct tonal shift, and as much as soon as you get back from Vietnam, Ronnie is dealing with his injury, that's really where the movie completely changes tone. I think up until that point, it could have been very similar to a lot of other war movies that I've seen.
Good point. It could have been very similar to other war movies, and it certainly is not. I think the three of us maybe weren't prepared to see pain or anguish in so many ways. But we're not going to start talking about that yet. We're going to take an advertisement break. If you have not seen this movie, now's a great time to first prepare yourself, then watch this movie. But we got to take a break, and then we'll come back with the plot summary where we're going to spoil the movie. Go ahead and pause, come on back after the break, and Chad will do the plot summary.
Welcome to the Flashback Flicks Retro Movie Podcast. I'm Ricky.
I'm Grayson.
And every week we review a movie from the past and reflect on things we missed, things we loved, and things we want to see again.
Yeah, because we believe any movie worth watching is worth watching again.
So if you like films, friendship, and a lot of callbacks,
I mean, just so many callbacks,
then subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever RSS feeds go for like-minded movie-loving individuals. Like you.
What happens when two modern film fans go back and rewatch all the old classic films from yesteryear to see if they hold up? You get the Classic Film Jerks podcast. Find the Classic Film Jerks podcast on all the major platforms.
And welcome back. We have Chad prepared for a plot summary of Born on the 4th of July.
Get your whatever comforting item, blanket, food, whatever, before I read this. So, Ron Kovic, he grew up as a starry-eyed patriot in Massapequa, New York in the 1950s. He's really inspired by President John F. Kennedy's inaugural address and joins the United States Marine Corps. He's promptly sent to Vietnam to fight. On his second tour of duty, his unit unintentionally slaughters a Vietnamese village, mistaking them for combatants. The unit then comes under enemy fire and Ron mistakenly kills a member of his own platoon. In another firefight, Ron's team is ambushed and he is critically wounded. This is about where we talk about the tonal shift. He winds up paralyzed from the waist down and spends several months recovering in a veterans hospital. Conditions inside the hospital are really poor and Ron feels rightfully neglected. He spirals into a cycle of alcoholism and has flashbacks due to things like a baby crying. Ron meets his old high school sweetheart. Her name's Donna. She's sort of become a hippie protester, and she's protesting the Kent State shootings, and the demonstration is violently broken up by the police, furthering Ron's disillusionment with America. Ron's parents can't really deal with his alcoholism and just spiraling out of control, so they send him to Villa Dolce to recover. It's known as a haven for Vietnam veterans. It's down in Mexico. There, he solicits prostitutes and befriends another paraplegic named Charlie. So from Mexico, Ron decides to find the parents of the young member of his platoon he accidentally killed so he can ask for forgiveness. The parents grant that forgiveness, but the young man's wife cannot bring herself to forgive Ron. He then joins the Vietnam Veterans Against the War organization and winds up attending the Republican National Convention where Richard Nixon is given his speech. Anti-war sentiment is received about as well as you would expect during a Richard Nixon speech. He's spit on, threatened, everything else. And the film ends with Ron delivering a public address at the Democratic National Convention endorsing a draft dodger for president. So there you have it.
We travel with Ronnie through several parts of his life. We start when he's really young in Massapequa, New York. And I think it is something to be said about capturing the youth, capturing the excitement of this is American life at the time. And even though I mentioned to our listeners to prepare yourself for some pain, and then Chad told you to go get your comfort blanket, you don't need it yet. If things are kind of true blue American, and you mentioned with listening to the words of John F. Kennedy and his mother saying to him, "I had a dream of you in front of people, and you were saying great things." For this first part of the movie where he's young, and we're getting kind of an idea. I think maybe it's when he's a teenager in high school on the wrestling team. We start to get an idea of what his values are, of what the values of young men, young patriots are. How do you feel about that general feeling of, oh, the war's on and we got to go help, we got to go do our part? That's what is driving him, or at least part of what's driving him. Anything to say about that drive towards becoming something?
Oh yeah, I think those are all really good observations, and I agree completely with them. The whole first 20 minutes especially the 4th of July parade at the beginning of the sequence was like a Norman Rockwell painting, quintessential Americana. This is everything that the white suburban American life was at its finest. And but yeah, going back to the themes that you asked about, I think patriotism was definitely kind of thick in the air. At least that's what's conveyed in the film, or Oliver Stone chooses to focus on. And the other thing that I that really jumped out at me was the theme of masculinity. I think that was something separate from patriotism. The notion of these are the things that men do, not just as far as patriotic acts, but as far as like acts of strength and acts of perseverance and dominance of self. And discipline, like joining the Marine Corps whenever the recruiters come to his school is kind of portrayed as an act of the utmost discipline that not every man is capable of doing, not just something that's a patriotic duty that everybody should do. His wrestling environment, or like the environment that he was in on the wrestling team at his school. His instructor, his coach is essentially a drill sergeant, the way that he's barking at him, so roughly. It's everything, is being called into question, like his ability and his weakness, and, they're being pushed to behave more strongly. And it becomes really clear that Ronnie has these really, high expectations for himself, both patriotically and in terms of masculinity, that are really strongly portrayed everywhere around him in his life. It seems like he's getting it on all sides, at least what's shown in the beginning of the film.
Yeah, definitely. And they didn't really let you reminisce and be happy about childhood for long. Like, they give you early foreshadowing. Those kids, they're ambushed while they're outside playing soldier, and then there's the hard cut to the spinning firework, and we have this happy parade. And he's pointing out, he's like, look, Dad, a soldier. And it's this American patriotism. Most of this town, it was a military town. So we've got generations. Most of them had grandfathers and fathers that fought in several different wars. But then things happen. There's a slight trumpet stutter, and it's just a masterful touch. But the trumpet misses its note. And they mess up intentionally here for the soundtrack, and we start seeing the soldiers in wheelchairs in the parade.
Yep.
And they don't look really happy, and a firework goes off, and one of the soldiers flinches.
Right.
One of the veterans flinches. And then it just gets sadder and sadder. The people in the background are still cheering their heads off, but you see people that are missing limbs and just the shell-shocked look. So Oliver Stone's really not letting us drink in this American pie for very long. It's like, there might be something wrong with the image you're conjuring up of the majorette twirling and grinning and the people in old cars just happily waving to you.
And you're a grand old flag playing, and
Yeah.
it is, and it's a marching band tune, and things are happy. I can imagine the smell of apple pie or a candy. Just something so like a burger off the grill. So much. Even the name of the movie is about like these ideals. And I'm glad you brought up that trumpet. It is a trumpet. At first I thought it sounded kind of like a bugle, but when you get, Oliver Stone gives you, like, here come the veterans, and there is sort of some excitement, but then you look directly into their faces and see the lines on them, and you see the lasting effects of what it was that they went through. And we're still in sort of Americana happy land at this time, but we are shown that this is going to be a theme here, is that what they went through was tough. And maybe what we're not talking about here is the war itself. It's the movie is going to present what comes after that is tough. But with the drill sergeant like wrestling coach, Andres, you said he was getting it on all sides, like he was almost getting pushed. Like, this is what you do. Our dads got to be. That's what the line was. Our
Mhm.
dads got to be in World War II. But I think he gets a lot of pressure from his mom during this
yeah.
time.
Oh yeah,
as well.
absolutely. It's very asymmetric.
There's definitely an emphasis on being a winner. I thought it was so odd.
Yes.
We mentioned the wrestling match. The town boos him after he loses. He's talking about being the best and cutting weight and everything else and how he's just going to be the best. And then he gets pretty much dominated and the town boos him. I'm like, wow.
Yeah,
That's harsh.
very
Very
traumatic.
Yeah, it's but he's pushed in this way. The culture is of masculinity as well. What you said, Andres. This is a dream scenario. This is what he's meant to do,
Mhm.
Ronnie. He is meant to do this. But I'm reminded of the prom scene. Even still, it's 28 minutes before we get to Vietnam, and there's an interesting little vignette about this movie could have taken so many different directions than the one that it did, and it has the acclaim that it does because of the direction that it took. But we're looking at a guy runs through the rain to go kiss his sweetheart at prom, and at this point you're thinking like, I guess maybe we're gonna see what comes of that relationship afterwards, and then we take a pretty serious turn. Would anything else stand out about that initial first 28 minutes of Americana before we go over to Vietnam?
It is such a carefree attitude at this point. Like this made me laugh because it's just different culture, but he's sitting in a diner with his friends reading a Playboy. Like these are teenagers, and he's just casually reading it through. Maybe he's actually reading the articles like everyone always claims.
Like we say, yeah.
But yeah, the waitress is just like, yep, whatever. Teenage boys reading pornography in the middle of my restaurant. That's fun. It's just such a different time. You've got the Yankee hats, and there's only one guy. It does remind me a lot of kind of the sentiment behind 9/11. Obviously, we were actually attacked for 9/11, but there was a lot of banding together, and we've got to do something. We've got to fight something. This was
rallying around the flag, I think, is the phenomenon. Is what they call it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But there's only one friend out of all their group of friends, and we find out, I think 3 of them perished. But there's one friend that's like, I'm not fighting. And to Andres' point, they're making fun of that guy. They are calling him every name in the book.
They're absolutely roasting him.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm going to college.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve Boyer, who we will see a little later in
Brilliant ideas by Steve. I'm stealing that.
Yeah, his burger, his whole hole in the center burger scheme is pretty brilliant. I will say so.
Saves him $40,000 a year.
Brilliant. Why didn't they catch on?
Really brilliant. And you know what? I will say, mostly positive work communication out of him as well.
Yeah. Apart from pinching his waitresses and things like that. Yeah.
Aside from that, yeah. He's made fun of. Oh yeah, somebody's got to stay home with the women and children. Is what they say about him. He makes the decision to go to school, as does Donna, who goes to Syracuse. And then we get to the point where we are now beginning what I thought was going to be the majority of the movie. I think it was going to be like, now we're going to Vietnam, and now we have a war movie. And we are seeing, I think, I know what stands out to me first of all in this, I'll start with it, is there's communication going to Sergeant Ronnie, and almost immediately that communication breaks down. He's asked if he sees the rifles in the distance. He doesn't. He lies. Then he tells the troops, hold your fire. Within 3 seconds, somebody's firing, and then the whole line's firing. Terrible communication breakdown right away in this high-stress scenario. That's the first thing that stuck out to me in this place. What's happening here? take a line from another movie like War is Hell. But here um, we have this communication breakdown. He says he's on his second tour. What about this time? We have now moved to Vietnam. What stands out to you?
I think like you said, the immediacy of that happening was it kind of serves to shock you a little bit because
It sets the tone too.
yeah, absolutely. And for 30 seconds you're in that scene, and then Ronnie or Sergeant Kovac is he's talking to the new recruit from Georgia whose name escapes me at this moment.
Wilson.
Yeah, Wilson, and he's kind of exuding an air of confidence because, as he says, this is the second tour of duty. He has kind of a small role in command in his platoon, and it seems like he's trying to project a little bit of confidence and security to this new guy who is kind of unsure about how he's going to be doing here, and immediately, as Dustin mentioned, that order and attempt at soothing and control and exuding confidence and leadership is thrown asunder by the chaos that ensues in this village that they come upon.
Yeah, I was struck by a couple things. One, we never see a jungle, and that's what Vietnam is absolutely famous for. But two, just the contrast between, we've talked about Full Metal Jacket. One of the worst but more memorable lines of Full Metal Jacket is, "How can you shoot women and children?" And the guy says, "Easy, you just don't lead them as much."
Yeah.
And here we have a complete juxtaposition to that kind of psychopathy of they accidentally kill women and children. There's a baby pretty much feeding at the breast here. And the response is, "We didn't do this, did we?" And just the shell shock and the horror.
They're horrified. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking, because having not seen it before, now I was preparing for the worst. I was wondering what the response would be from the troops coming in. Did either of you? This was me. Did either of you see the idea of a cover up, or it's like, we can't let anybody know what happened here? Did you think that they were going to open fire on the survivivors?
I definitely entertained the possibility. I think I had Full Metal Jacket and Apocalypse Now on the brain whenever I was thinking about what could happen next as they entered the scene to see the damage that they had caused. And I think they do end up having to leave or flee as the Vietcong actually, they actually do show up, and then they have to. The situation changes very rapidly, and kind of neglect the few survivors in treating them of their wounds. But
yeah, and this is our, maybe not exactly the first, but maybe the first memorable taste of real anguish and pain that we see, not just from Tom Cruise, who I think does a great job in this movie showing when he is in some type of pain. He's yelling, "Somebody help me, get help." Everyone's yelling, "Get help. I need help over here." Interesting, perhaps intentional foreshadowing. I need help. But they are horrified. They did not intend to do this, unlike the Full Metal Jacket character. But we're talking about an atrocity. And that came from that breakdown of communication. They were told to hold their fire, and then these people die. Then we're moving a little bit further, and the shots of them walking through the grasslands, I thought there was some really actual like beautiful camera work with the sun in the background, the colors of this time in the movie are vibrant in their own way and really set it apart from the rest of the movie. But we see them walking through the patio, and then there's another firefight, and this is where we see his injury, we see his casualty. Was there anything about the combat here that seemed like, oh, that's really realistic, or like, this is cool how they're showing it, to either of you two?
I would say that I enjoyed the camera work immensely for the shot, and going back to what you said about the scenery that was set, and the color tone of the sunset kind of going over the field behind them, the kind of like the umber colored grass that they're walking through as they approach the village. There's a really dynamic use of kind of camera technique that I thought was pretty fantastic. During the scene, you see a lot of switching between wide open shots when you get the entire birth of all the soldiers in the regiment. And on top of that, whenever the firefight actually starts, everything becomes very shaky and up close and personal. The length of the camera's focus changes, from wide and far back all the way to, kind of medium range to intimate. Especially when the soldiers, when you're focusing on individual soldiers, they use the shaky cam very effectively in terms of kind of conveying the nervousness, the panic that was going through their minds as they were being ambushed, or at least that's how I felt.
Yeah, the confusion and fright. He later describes it to the family of Wilson as, we were scared. And that's something you usually see from like the fresh-faced recruit, but here you're seeing it from the commander. This was the sergeant that was scared, the sergeant that was confused, and he's firing at his own people. So I thought that was more unique. I'm used to the war movies, the commander being the one to have it together and scream and be able to find it, but we're very isolated. You see everyone just scatter. And that struck me as unique and likely realistic. I mean, it hasn't even been that long. We had the famous NFL player who was killed through friendly fire over in
Tillman.
Operation. Yes, Raw. Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Pat Tillman. Yep.
Pat Tillman. That's right. Yeah.
Yep. Operation Enduring Freedom. Yeah.
It's the shot making of some of these up close, and then when Ronnie is shot, there's a cool overhead scene of him kind of going, keeping his eyes up on the perimeter, but he is injured. He's shot. I thought, oh, the worst. I mean, naively, I guess he gets shot in the foot. I'm like, okay, I guess that's his injury. Not seeing the rest of what's going to happen to him, which clearly is the biggest part of the rest of his story, aside from what he does kind of have to reckon with later, is accidentally shooting that young Private Wilson, and then having to go to his superior officer. That scene where I was wondering if he would have the courage to say it. It seems as if All-American Kid would know that I have to tell the truth, right? Something in there, because we also know that he's Catholic. Something in there was, I need to tell the truth. It's almost as if I didn't think about this while watching the movie. It's like, I gotta go confess. I think I've shot him. No, you didn't, son. No, it could have happened. No, I think I shot him. I shot him. No, quit saying that. And how many times does that happen? Like 4 or 5 times before the commanding officer kind of blows his top.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, something like that. He was pretty persistent.
I mean, at this point, I'm thinking to myself, oh man, this is going to be the thing that he has to hold on to, but really it's him being a wheelchair user for the rest of the movie, or at least immediately after return. And we are brought to, with cheery soundtrack, we are brought to the hospital. Tell me about this hospital.
This hospital was an experience. No other way to really put it. It was, you're kind of shocked immediately by kind of the poor state of affairs of the hospital, and it's made really clear as you're going around and seeing the perspective of the orderlies and the other hospital staff. There's incompetence, there's negligence. There's understaffing. It's very clear. There's under funding. There's obviously limited facilities, the care that's being given to the veterans is kind of subpar at best. And it's made really clear that this is not a place of optimal healing. Right,
they
off
would
the bat.
they would be lucky if they got like a subpar rating. Right,
Yeah.
subpar is a goal for this place.
Right, to imagine a hospital functioning in this way in this day and age is absolutely unthinkable.
Yeah, he's staring upside down at his vomit for 2 hours, just screaming for someone.
Right,
And
yeah.
all the orderlies are. They're blamed in this movie, but I have to imagine they were just overworked to the point of numbness and burnout,
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't afford to really care anymore. Like, that's all that they had left was just shells, because they're understaffed, they're under-equipped. They can't do anything other than just pump drugs into people. And that's just a horrible state for everyone. It sucks their souls, and it clearly has a traumatic effect on veterans. He comes back expecting to be treated like royalty because the town's having parades for veterans, and he's an American hero, and he's like, well, I'm an American hero, and he's just not getting the treatment or respect he feels that title and he's due.
When he was in like the field medic's tent, he was prepared to die. I believe the chaplain comes over and begins to read him his last rites.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He said when he was 17 and still on the back in high school, like, I'm prepared to go over there and die if I have to. Early on in I guess we'll call it overall a rehab process. I'm also, when I mentioned the cheery soundtrack, I believe it's a brown-eyed girl starts playing as they are like rinsing.
Oh my
the
God!
bedpans out.
Yes, yeah, that was like a car wash of veterans. That was quite shocking.
Yeah. You've got Don McLean's American Pie with some of the physical therapy rehab. You've got when the person in the bed next to him has, I'm guessing, a prostitute come by. I don't think it was an orderly, or I'm assuming that's what it was. But My Girl is playing when during that. So you're thinking, okay, this is a step. This is one step in the process to recovery. But I don't know, like, it takes us a long time to get to even the idea of recovery, especially with the setback, right?
That's a way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. So before the setback, when he's saying, "I'll walk again," and the doctor's saying, "There's a really good chance you'll never walk again." Yeah, no, I'm gonna walk. I want my leg. I'm gonna walk. No,
that
you
doctor
won't.
was not optimistic at all. He was just Captain Blunt at that point.
He
It's like,
goes,
you will never walk again.
That's right. He said, will I ever be able to have children? No, but we have a really good psychologist here. It's like,
Right.
oh man, all right, that's the truth. So there's a guy, I think his name is Leon, but somebody starts screaming while they're all watching TV.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, oh, Leon's going nuts again, and the orderlies don't care. We've seen that Vietnam veteran trope. Is it fair to call it a trope?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
But very quickly, before he leaves the hospital, he's kind of, when he's upside down in the bed and he's yelling about looking at his own vomit, we see him becoming that already. I start losing hope that the recovery is going to look anything more than this.
I think after Ronnie suffers, it's very clear the transition between his kind of hopeful persistence, where he's stubbornly kind of fighting against the prognosis of the doctor, who has told him that your spine is severed, you're not going to be able to walk again, and despite that, he's still really earnest in his physical therapy and trying to rehabilitate himself slowly in the hopes of one day be able to get some sensation back. Then all of a sudden he gets like a really bad injury that prolongs his time in the hospital even longer. And I think just the fact that, or it seems like it's made clear just by virtue of the fact that he was being so stubborn and persistent, he's actually made his situation worse. And I think that actually, that time and that he's forced to be there even longer, and the realization that he kind of did it to himself, just trying to do everything that he knew how to do, which was push himself to be, as hard as possible to be the best that he could, wasn't enough. and that's just something that he was he was actually out of control of, and there's nothing that he could do about. That's where I think like the transition becomes really clear. That as you said, he kind of starts to fall into the trope of kind of like the disillusioned veteran slowly.
Yeah, this entire first half of the movie is kind of his struggle to accept reality of how things actually are. He sees the sad soldiers, but he's like, yeah, I want to be one. I want to fight for the country. I want to stop communism. And then when he gets to war, it's not that bad. I signed up for a second duty. It's what I need to do. And then I'm going to walk again. And then if you don't mind me talking about him coming back, the brother we mentioned, he's playing The Times They Are Changing. We see this big parade. Everyone's cheering. Now he's back in a parade and he's being rolled through. And people are flicking him off. And they're giving him terrible looks. And just awful chants.
They're yelling at him to die.
Yeah. And so, again, he's not accepting the reality of America's sentiment about this war. This was right about the Tet Offensive. It was 10 days after he was shot. The Tet Offensive really changed the perception of the war. Yeah, he's not accepting that either. He's like, I'm a hero. You need to recognize me. I've got the uniform. Give me my respect. And it's just not the reality of America at this time.
Like coming to grips with the choices he's made and how it's led him here. But he's still thought that, it's unfortunate that I think in his head he would say that I got crippled, whereas other people lost their life. I think he would say, I still did the right thing, that my credit is due. And to a little boy, a parade is really what you want. And then what we learn is that like he's getting... he's talking to Steve. He's talking to Steve, the burger man, at the burger shop, which has a name that I forgot. And he's saving all the money. He's telling his employees are doing a great job, and he's got the girls wearing the mini skirts, and he's got a plan. He's expanding. He's the guy that stayed at home, college. He's got this life, and he offers a job to Ronnie. And Ronnie's just thinking, yeah, so we're going to go in as partners. And that's when, I guess, if it's not a victory, but that's when Steve, no, you got to start at the ground floor. You can be a cashier and work your way up. Maybe you can be a manager someday. But clearly he's not being given what he thought he should be given, even from his friend. But he still thinks that what he did was right. So he's really fighting with that.
I think it's interesting about that scene that also because it seems like whenever that offer is being made to him by Steve, Ronnie, he definitely seems to hesitate. It seems obvious that it's not really like an optimal offer to him. And then he mentions that he has his veteran stipend to actually fall back on, and his friend Steve, it's something that really stuck out to me, actually like kind of belittles him for relying on, or like thinking about the possibility of relying on that instead of working.
That's charity
working
money.
with his own, yeah, exactly, that's charity money, and that he should work up and and pull himself up by his bootstraps and do something with his hands and earn his own living.
And I think at that point, I'm thinking we're gonna start seeing more of like reality versus expectations and how it settles in for Kovic. He when he's giving that speech on stage, and I think the banner even says Ron Kovic, local hero.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And when he's in the car, a Continental. When he's in the car, that's when you start seeing he's getting a little bit of the flinches from the toy guns and the firecrackers. You're starting to see that, but you get that he's on stage giving his speech about the boys, the morale is high, and we think that we're going to win this war, and I have a heart full of, and he starts to hear the baby cry, and we know what that's in reference back to.
Mm-hmm. I think that second parade scene also is his birthday, because he was born on 4th of July.
Oh yeah,
and
name of the movie.
yeah, and No, that second parade scene really brings it all full circle, right? Because it's everything about the way that it's shot and the sequence of it is, it mirrors the scene that Ronnie remembers from his childhood, except for now he's in the perspective of the veterans that he was looking on at, from the sidelines of the parade, and he's the person that's flinching at the fireworks going off, and all of a sudden the demographic of the crowd has changed completely to what he remembers when he was a boy, instead of just kind of like good patriotic Americans, as I guess they'd be perceived, lining the streets and cheering him on. Now there's also like the confluence and mixture of all these other people. There's hippies. There's really vocal protesters, and there's also normal people that just look on with a mixture of appreciation and pity and sadness at him. And so like from the other perspective, Ronnie's having to take all this on, and it still seems like he's fighting against the expectation of everything of what he should be and his sacrifice should have meant, and the reality of him coming on, how things actually are in the United States at that time.
Yeah, it's a culmination. You find out his brother is anti-war, and there's the reaction to that of, how dare you, this is what I went through. And he's going through a lot of, that phony sentiment of everyone keeps telling him, you look good, you look good. And that's what they're saying because they don't know how to react to someone that is now paralyzed. That's just what they say. So he gets up there to make the speech, and you see the confidence kind of fade from his face as they're listing off. I think there were three of his friends that didn't come home. And there's some guilt in his face when they're listing off those names. And then they're like, well, he made it. And
Yeah.
he didn't make it intact. There was one thing that I wish they hadn't done. I'm sure Oliver Stone just did this as a stylistic choice, as a criticism of other parts of American history, but at one point there's a hallucination during this speech, and there are two people, and I think they're both white, but they're in Native American headdresses. And
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And then it fades back to the crowd, and I looked, I'm like, there's no way there's just two random white guys in Native American headdresses in a 4th of July rally, right? And there weren't. So that was something that I think he injected in there to try and make a point, but it honestly was a little bit distracting to me.
It didn't land with me. We didn't need to add extra anguish, suffering here on top of the guilt.
We didn't need to kick the puppy.
Yeah, but also this.
But yeah, and also this. Well, when I think it is right after that speech on stage that he runs into Timmy. Timmy was one of his friends from high school, and takes him out to go drink and let off some steam. And we don't really. It's not a slow progression. Really quickly, he starts being seen as a jerk. We see that almost right away. Do you guys remember any amount of time before he's being loud and brash and yelling about Vietnam?
The scene was the transition, at least in terms of the progression of the movie, was pretty immediate. I think the only cue to the audience that some significant amount of time might have elapsed was that Ronnie's hair gets decently longer, and he has more facial hair in the next scene where he's seen acting a little bit more brashly and drinking and being, I guess, a little bit more belligerent at the bar that they're at.
Yeah, the mustache and everything.
Yeah.
He attends with Donna. This was kind of a weird transition. He goes from Donna to, I think, a Bruce Springsteen song, but you see some of that reality set in of the cops just beating all these protesters and their sad music. They're also got an angle of beating the camera. But yeah, goes from that to the contrast of the very clean-cut veteran. I think he was from World War II. Says he was at Iwo Jima arguing with Ronnie about how they're treating their service. And the World War II vet, everything for him, at least, I don't want to say it wasn't traumatic because Iwo Jima was likely traumatic for everyone involved, but he's been able to process it and he seems to be handling it, whereas Ronnie is just not.
Yeah, you ain't the only Marine in here, man. You picked them, they didn't pick you. Quit your pissing and moaning.
Yeah, that sounds like a Marine.
Yeah, and he follows that up with Semper Fi. So they're about to, they're about to get into it. It is the culmination of this night that leads him home, drunk, and that's when he starts waking up the neighbors with his screaming, and he's really opening up about the things that he feels and the truths that he grew up with, that he is now having to fight against. And I'll start with how I feel about this. He rolls into the house and his parents are still awake. Now I think at this point he is maybe 24. But he comes home very late at night. Parents are still awake. I'm assuming that they have to do this all the time now because he lives at home again. Another thing that you have to kind of put yourself in the place of. And so you realize that, like, well, yeah, of course the parents are happy to have their son home, but their entire life now must change in order to accommodate. So he comes home blasted drunk and immediately starts taking the crucifix off the wall. He is kind of in attack mode now of all the things that he grew up with, of all the things that was supposed to be right. That tirade, clearly this is affecting his mother really hard. This was maybe my favorite scene. I know we have a superlative section, but I think this was a moment where I'm like, okay, this is now turning to the latter, like maybe the latter hour of the movie is, and now we're going to see what happens after he leaves Massapequa. Do you guys feel the impact of that scene as well?
Oh, absolutely. As you said, this is like the big confrontation of all the ideals that have been instilled with him throughout his life, and of course, it happens in his childhood home, where is the place of the instilling of all those many of those ideals in the first place, or where they're reinforced. And we saw early on in the movie, the scene of them sitting around. His family sitting around the dinner table, and the comments that his mother and father make, and all the the influences that he's getting around, and as well as the religious influences that he's having, and go back to this scene where Ronnie's still dealing with all the he's dealing with the trauma that he's dealing with, and he's living in this house where all these ideals that have been instilled with him are still glaring at him, and they contrast so sharply with the experience that he's had, that he just has to it seems like he just kind of bursts out of it and fights, lashes out against everything around him, especially his mother, who can't deal with it at all, or is kind of intolerant to it and has the least patience for it, is the one that seems to be most affected by this outburst.
Yeah, he's just attacking everything that she is. And Caroline Kava, who's playing Mrs. Kovic, I get frustrated often. I'm a person of faith myself. I get frustrated how people of faith are displayed in a lot of movies, because she's very just dogmatic of everything. It's very simple. Oh, God's will, things like that. But he is attacking that. Dustin, you're right. Attack mode. He's going, "Thou shalt not kill, Mom," and then he attacks someone, "Thou shalt not kill women and children," and goes further and says, "God is as dead as my legs."
Yeah.
And then to cap off, I don't know a word. I need a thesaurus for when you rip your own catheter out and start screaming penis in a very threatening way.
I think when he starts tugging on the catheter, the family responds like, "Oh no," and I think one of them says like, "Not the catheter again," something like that, as if like this wasn't the first time that he's had an outburst like this. This is a journey, and this is when he decides to I guess he's asked to leave, and that's not the right way to put it. I don't want him in my house. He can't live there anymore. And you had said in the plot summary that like they send him down to Via Dolce.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that was like a joint decision. I truly didn't know exactly the context of how he got there. But that's the next step on this journey, is down to Mexico, where some things are easier, and some things are coming to grips with them. are certainly harder. Now, with this area down here is when we finally get to see our boy Willem.
Creepy as always. Like this did. I was like, oh yeah, there's Willem Dafoe. But man, he's just. I don't even know how to describe Charlie. He is just accepted this debaucherous lifestyle. He's got a ridiculous, could audition for Kiss tongue.
Yeah.
And when Willem Dafoe's doing that with a very long tongue, staring straight at the camera, just slowly, licking a la Gene Simmons, that is Green Goblin-esque. Flashbacks. Yeah, this entire crew, I mean, it seems like they're happier, but they're drinking themselves to death. They're on drugs. They've got prostitutes. And Willem Dafoe's in a wheelchair. Charlie's in a wheelchair. So he's just talking about, grabbing their breasts and having one in one hand and coming up with some form of compensation and oral sex and things like that. And it's just like, okay, I guess this is a reality. It doesn't seem healthy, but this is where this is described as a haven. Ron's dad describes this as a haven to send for vets.
Yeah. And in a way it is.
But imagine a religious family. They don't know what's going on here.
Yeah.
The word haven is loosely interpreted. Yeah.
Right. It's after Mexico that's when he goes to visit the family of Wilson. Am I right?
Yes.
Wilson?
Yeah. He comes back and that's the first thing he does.
Yeah. And I think at that point he's on his redemption, maybe self-reflective redemptive arc is there. Or is it maybe that's when that portion of the story starts? But we got to get through Mexico first. So I'm just going to start with something memorable from that period, which is how understanding the prostitute is of his condition. More understanding than any doctor or any orderly or anybody willing to listen to him. She is maybe the most open and caring, maybe empathetic person that he's been in contact with since getting back from Vietnam. Would you guys agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That scene or that sequence of scenes also stood out to me a lot. She seems like the first person that's really kind of treated him, like a human being since he's been in his condition, and to the best of her ability, kind of simulates a normal sexual encounter with him, and it's something that it seems really clear that Rodney gets a lot of fulfillment from just because he's being treated the way he's always wanted to be treated as a man. And I think this kind of touches back to the themes of masculinity that I brought up at the beginning of the movie, that it's been kind of drilled into his head since he's been young, and he comes back as a young man in the prime of his life, and he can no longer do the things that young men like to do and are tend to do. Right. And it's only until this moment that he's actually able to experience that that exuberance, at least to some degree. I thought it was really I will go and say that I thought this scene was actually quite beautiful in the way that it was portrayed.
Yes.
It was, but it was also so difficult because you see the pain and almost resignation when she's putting her hands down his pants and he's just like, it doesn't work, and she's explaining. But it's also, you see Ronnie fall for her because of all the things, Andres, that you just mentioned. She's good at her job. This is kind of he's hoping for a Pretty Woman type situation where it's the prostitute with a heart of gold.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Whereas she's really good at her job.
Yeah.
She knows how to keep employed. But he falls for her because, like you said, she's the first person that has acted real to him or treated him with real respect rather than sympathy. But then he sees her with another man, another client, and that just sends him spiraling back to the point he's getting kicked out of a place where it's kind of like Last Chance You. I have no idea how you get kicked out of this, but him and Charlie both managed to get kicked out of Mexico.
I
That's
think
really
he kicked out of Mexico. Well, I mean, he's not doing so bad at that point. He's just sticking by Charlie, who is getting kicked out for decking that one prostitute.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that,
like,
guys.
Yeah, it seems like Charlie is experiencing a lot of the same, torment and kind of physical inadequacy that Ronnie experiences, but kind of to a deeper, more hardened degree. It seems like he's been there for a long time, and this is something that he thinks he's kind of learned to cope with. But it's it's really clear with the way that Charlie deals with this prostitute, making fun of his handicap, that he doesn't have this under control. This is something that is still burning him, and it's one of the reasons he's in his pain spiral that he's in, and living in the situation that he's in, despite the fact that he projects this outward position of I'm enjoying myself. This is the greatest life, that I could have. I get to drink and have sex with prostitutes, and this is, what else could somebody want? And it's, it's very clear. And I think Ronnie realizes it that this isn't. If I spend enough time here, I'm gonna turn into Charlie. And I think this is like really his rock bottom, where everything after this in the movie is him climbing out of this hole, because I think he realizes that he doesn't want to be that way.
Oh, but there's one more place for him to go before he hits
Right.
rock bottom.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and before we get there, and Chad, I want you to talk about it, but there was one guy that when he first meets Charlie, right after he sticks the tongue out and swallows the worm, some dude rolls up behind him and goes, "Don't stay here, man. Get out."
Yeah, I do remember that distinctly.
Yeah, that's such a impactful type of thing. Like, this is your chance now, before it goes spiral. But yeah, he does have to crawl out of somewhere, right?
Always listen to that dude. Doesn't matter if you've met them before. If someone comes up to you in a haven, this is every horror movie ever, and says, "Get out," listen to that dude. Turn around. If your car keys are on the table, call an Uber, whatever. Get out.
That's a trope you can bet the farm on. I would listen to that guy in a heartbeat without a doubt.
Doesn't matter.
Andres, do you have any rules like that? I've got one, which is I took this from Jack Donaghy from 30 Rock, which is never follow a hippie to a second location.
That's fantastic. No, I can't say that I do. I'm going to have to look out for it in the future, and if I ever do find one out, I'll let you know.
Sure thing. Or if it comes up, yeah. So yeah, they the last leg of the Mexico journey is trying to go to another place with a whorehouse. But they think, or Charlie thinks that the cabbie's taking the wrong place. They get into a fight. Once again, some of these scenes, a fist fight from guy in the back seat to the cab driver in the front seat, and he's yelling in Spanish, and he can't stop cursing up a storm. And I mean, it would be humorous if it weren't for the overall general tone of like, this is a highway to hell, or I think it was also described as purgatory. But yeah, they reach this culmination of, I think the idea is, who had it worse?
I was going to say, do you remember what they're arguing about? Because I do.
Yeah,
by all means.
I believe it's, did you kill babies?
Not just did you kill babies, because Charlie is basically saying, you didn't kill babies. But then it becomes, how many did you kill? And Charlie will never respond to Ronnie's kind of pressing of, like, well, how many was it? He never says, but he keeps saying, Ron, you didn't kill babies. You didn't kill babies. And we know Ron did. We don't know what's going on with Charlie. But it's, again, Dustin, you hit it. It should potentially be funny in any different context. Two guys basically slap fighting in wheelchairs. Oh, you could see like Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly doing
right?
this.
Totally, yeah.
And it would be funny. But here we have drunk Vietnam vets reliving trauma, comparing how many children they've killed, and they get in a slap fight over it. And it's just like, okay, this is officially the Dwayne Johnson rock bottom to this movie.
Still, after they're found, Ronnie says, "Are you okay?" And Charlie wants nothing to do with it. Like, F you, man. Once we get to the part where like he's redeeming himself and things are better, it's like the movie. Like, we know the movie's ending. The point of the movie wasn't, let's show you all this dark stuff to show you a super like awesome rise afterwards. I think you're supposed to live in the pain for this movie. That's what makes it an anti-war movie.
Yeah, you're never confident that he got it together. He gives a speech and he embraces someone that opposed his original philosophy altogether. But yeah, you're not confident that he's quit drinking, that he's got things together. Yeah, he wrote a book. But okay, apologizing to one family, is that really the road to redemption? Yeah, we're given the experience more than the resolution.
I have one thing I wanted to say that like gave me a satisfaction, like because the movie does end, with it's not as bad as it was, and it's getting better. But I agree with you. We don't know how better it gets. We just know that it wasn't getting kicked out of Mexico again. But the thing I would say that really gave me satisfaction, and Andres, if you have one, have it on deck. But mine is when they're trying to retake their position at the Republican convention, like we're going to retake the hall. All of the protesters are taking orders better than the Marines. Because he's barking out, we're going to go this way, we're going to go back in, and it's like they're charging a different style beach. Mm-hmm. And these people are listening to him. That was pretty cool.
I thought that was a really good showcase of like Ronnie's new found or new confidence and acceptance of his position, and it kind of showcases his ability to affect change and take a position of leadership, because it's real clear in this scene that like he's giving orders and he's coming up with like a counter protest plan to kind of take back the position outside of the convention where they've been kicked out by the police, and he's really effectively leading this charge. And it seems like here that you see like the first glimpses of his newfound purpose. I think it's done pretty effectively.
Yeah, and not to jump too far into the political deep end, but I thought this was an interesting, obviously Ron is giving his story here, but it was an interesting contrast from Oliver Stone of he does the RNC convention, then goes straight to the Democratic National Convention, and he presents them in two different lights, and there probably was, I'm sure there was very different reactions. The Democrats at this point had shifted tonally. But it's interesting that there's just the embrace, because Vietnam was started under a Democratic presidency. It was Lyndon Johnson, and then it goes to Nixon, and Nixon winds up embracing it. But it's just a very interesting contrast to the two, and just the shift of, from Kennedy to Nixon, where these parties wound up.
Well, I think there was a time when you say like Kennedy to Nixon. I would say it was Kennedy. I had the discussion once before, where there was a time when people had Kennedy's picture hanging up in their houses. And I think that was the last time that we had a president that was loved by most.
Yeah, especially for Catholic families, that was huge.
Totally, absolutely.
This was an embracement of, okay, now we're going to be accepted. Catholics in America have not had the easiest time.
He was the first Catholic president, is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a huge thing of, is Kennedy going to do his own thing and do what's good for America, or is he going to listen to the Pope? Like he'd be some little puppet state of the papacy. So yeah, this was a real thing to particularly the Catholic population of America. Kennedy's picture was right up there with Jesus on the walls, you're right.
We took you along the journey that we took following Ronnie. Where he went to what he felt, and I think now it's time for us to kind of step back to just overall the film, our movie superlatives, and we'll start with the MVP of this film. Andres, who is your MVP?
I would really say all around that Tom Cruise does a really phenomenal job in this role. I think he plays a really wide range of parts. He's able to capture really well the development of this character and kind of express a really wide range of emotions, the anger, sadness, kind of manic expression, laughter, and everything that you can think of is really well done, I think.
Tom Cruise's range was shown really well. Dad, you're MVP.
Ron Kovac himself, Kovac, he co-wrote the story, and I think being willing to display yourself in such an ugly light, that's really hard to do. Like, I consider during the Change Ones thing, which we'll get to, like, if I were Ron, I would say, put something in there that makes me look good. Like, this is an hour and 40 minutes of me not being a very likable human being. And then you're really not sure if I'm likable in the end. What is happening? So, yeah, for having the humility to bear yourself like this, Ron Kovac.
That's a very, very good position. Like, and as you said, there's the ambiguity at the end of the movie that you don't even know if his upward progression is going to continue, and the vulnerability of putting himself in that situation and being portrayed in that light is really remarkable.
For me, it is Oliver Stone himself. But I feel like this was put together with all the right pieces, all the right spots, all the right emotions being shown, things getting worse and progressively worse, and then I'll never be able to shake the term getting kicked out of Mexico. But
You're welcome.
The progression of this movie was great. Now on to the best supporting actor, Andres.
Best supporting actor, I would say he kind of played a minor role, but his his friend Timmy, the actor that played him, Frank Whaley, I think he did a really good job of kind of playing his foil and kind of being the cautionary figure that kind of tries to influence him to be more careful as he's going downward in this struggle that he's dealing with. And I think he does it. It's very subtle the way he does it, but his facial expressions, the few things that he say, and the way that he says them, I thought they were very effective in kind of conveying that role.
Good choice.
Yeah. What about your choice?
I really like Jerry Levine. He's Stevie. He's the one that, that's other than partially the jerk attitude in the end and the sexual harassment, that's kind of me. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go to college and not be shot at. You can be patriotic all you want. That's keep me here and I'm going to do business. So I really liked his character, and I liked his scenes where kind of felt like, yeah, you're a bit prescient about what's going to happen here.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of him as well. My best supporting actor is one with a few lines, but I think a presence. Raymond J. Barry as Mr. Kovac, the dad Kovac. I think that there's something about how he portrays a father figure of someone like this tragedy, this event that has happened to his son is a nightmare to the person's happening to, but especially to your parents. You always want what's best for your kid. And so seeing how he responds and deals with the emotions and the reality of Ronnie, I thought was really well done, even with very few.
You wonder what he had seen, because he was very hesitant and tried to discourage Ronnie from. He's from the generation that doesn't talk about it. There's a lot of that even with current veterans. He does not talk about his experience, but you can tell very few lines, but great facial acting. I don't really want you to do this. This isn't what you think it is.
When Ronnie comes home, he says, like, you can't drink in this home. But what he's doing is he's trying to honor, I think, his wife wants. And I think that's what a lot of people of a certain generation is like, there's a whole generation, and honestly a lot of people should heed that, is that like when you are acting in service to your spouse, like in that sense, like there are some people that want only that. They did their hard work. They came back and they don't talk about the war. And now they're going to do their best to like make the household work. And I thought that was portrayed by him.
Yeah, I think Mr. Kovac is a really great choice as well. I think that was like a close second to me, because the way that he portrays, as Chad mentioned, was like the hesitance that he kind of he shows with his facial expressions, and the way that he leaves out certain things and pauses, and the kind of outward support to some degree, but kind of skepticism and wanting to to protect his child as much as he can without really ruining his ambitions, I suppose, was really masterfully well done. And the way that he's kind of like the silent supportive figure that Ronnie has in his household once he comes back and he's living with his family as well. He's the one that accommodates Ronnie by like altering his bedroom, to have a bigger door. He installs like the new fixtures in the bathroom so that he can be more comfortable using the bathroom independently, and just the way that he kind of does it like subtly and matter of fact, just so that Ronnie could be as comfortable and feel as normal as possible was really excellently done, I think.
Yeah. Family is number one to him, and all just by running local grocery store. Nothing above that. No higher dreams than that. He's reached his blue heaven. Hidden gem for you, Andres.
Hidden gem is an interesting term because he doesn't really hide very well. And Willem Dafoe is always my favorite every time I see him anywhere. It's hard to really pick anything apart from that. And I think just because Willem Dafoe is just such he's such a dynamic actor. He can do just about anything he sets his mind to. I've been on a Willem Dafoe kick the last few months, I would say. If a movie comes across my desk or my computer or whatever that has Willem Dafoe as a credit somewhere, I will watch that movie just to be able to see him for a couple of minutes doing something absolutely bizarre or remarkable. And I think that applies here as well. I think he did he's definitely not the only great thing about this movie, but he absolutely shines in the role that he's in.
His horror filmography ensures two things every time: that it's going to be weird and confusing, and you're going to see him naked at some point. Like, just strange projects.
Yeah, we have to tune in next week to Dafoe Movie Roundtable.
Yeah.
Hidden gem for you, Chad.
Fine, I'll give an actual answer to this. Okay, the Ron Kovic, he actually shows up in this film. He is the veteran in the very beginning, the childhood parade. He's he's close to you on the screen, being pushed in the wheelchair, and he flinches at the sound of fireworks. So that is the real Ron Kovic.
Oh, wow. He's the one, huh? Okay.
Hidden gem, we're going to go to two hidden gems. We've got Wayne Knight and John C. McGinley in this movie. Both stopped by for a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Just a little bit at that convention. Recast. This is a tough one. It is always the toughest one. Andres, you got to do it. You got to replace one cast member.
Kara Sedgwick as Donna, I would say, is my choice, or Kira, if I'm mispronouncing that. I think she does a fine job. I think she portrays the range of emotions that she needs to in the position that she's in, and you see her kind of take on the role of the kind of the countercultural protest movement enthusiast pretty well. But I think she doesn't really bring anything remarkable to those roles, and I think the transition is like too subtle. That it could have been something that might have been portrayed by somebody else a little bit better.
Like if it was somebody else, it might have been more memorable to the overall movie. It might.
I think so.
One of the least memorable things is that particular relationship.
Yeah.
And it's given so much significance at the beginning of the movie as far as Ronnie's childhood development that it seems like it's almost like an afterthought, and she doesn't actually isn't in any of the final scenes, if I recall correctly.
Right.
Apart from one of she might have been she wasn't even at the protest at the RNC, was she?
No.
Yeah. No, her arc kind of ends at Syracuse. She's no Jenny, right? I mean,
to the point of in the defense of the role that was being played. Of course, some of this a lot of this was taken from Ron Kovic's actual life, and you can't presume that they'd make such a big edit to his actual life story, and just to have the continuity of like a romantic interest throughout the movie. But it's just
right.
Something that really stood out to me.
I'm going with an extremely hot take here. I mean, Ron Kovic gave Tom Cruise his bronze medal his Bronze Star medal. He appreciated the performance so much. I'm recasting Tom Cruise.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I would rather have Johnny Depp here. I feel that they're close in age, and Johnny Depp does drunk mania better than anyone else in the industry. Now, Tom Cruise is crazy. He was actively campaigning to get a nerve agent put into his legs to temporarily paralyze him. So that's insane. But yeah, Johnny Depp can go straight-laced American boy to Captain Jack Sparrow and on a dime.
I think I agree with you in a way. I would want to see that. I think I like seeing when the decision was made to go with Tom Cruise. Oliver Stone had just seen Top Gun, and he said something like, "That kid has everything. What if we took it all away from him?" And that's why he decided to cast Tom Cruise in.
I think it's funny about Johnny Depp is that I've in my lifetime I've seen him play mostly pirates, and I forget that he has more dynamic, ability, acting ability than he could do other things. But you're absolutely right. I think that would be a good choice.
Yeah, Hunter S. Thompson.
That's right. Fear and Loathing in Massapequa. My recast is, and I actually, it is Timmy. My recast, Frank Whaley, who I only recognize as being Brett from Pulp Fiction, who is enjoying a big Kahuna burger in the morning. I'm going to replace him with a 20-year-old Paul Rudd as his buddy. I'd like to see. I think we have seen Paul Rudd in an excellent mustache in the Anchorman movies. It would have been 3 years earlier than his acting debut. Now let's get to the shots and the scenes. The best shot of this movie, Andres, what comes to mind?
I would say the best shot, or the shot that stands out the most to me would definitely be the scene of Ronnie's confrontation in his parents' home when he's coming home drunk. Because if you pay attention to it, he's actually wheeling around the house. The camera is somehow suspended at a fixed point, at a distance in front of him, and so you get this really interesting contrast between like the focus on him and his body and the kind of like the whirling movement of the house around him as he's kind of like spinning. So I think it's like really well done kind of portrayal of kind of like the deliriousness of drunkenness as he's kind of like swirling around and his everything is kind of blurry as he's going through this this catharsis of just like venting and rage. So I thought that was like, as far as the cinematic choice, that was my favorite.
Chad, what about you? Best shot?
Toward the beginning, there's a shot of, it's a slow walk in the initial parade with the veteran missing his arms. And the crowd starts to fuzz out in the background. And the veteran slowly turns towards the camera, and there are just lines of pain across his face. And you've got the music swelling too, that's making you feel these emotions. But I think no other shot for me encapsulates what Oliver Stone was trying to say as that guy's facial expression. So maybe Hidden Gem as well, but yeah, just the pain emphasized through that shot.
I agree, and I probably said pain a lot in this podcast. For me, the most memorable shot, the low shot of him on stage, with the striped awning above him and the blue sky above, where he loses track of his focus from the baby crying and the helicopters going. The use of the patriotic colors and themes with the trauma associated with it, I think was not like there was one big pivot, but it was a good pivoting point for me. Mm-hmm. Let's go a little bit further with the best scene, Andres.
Best scene, the best scene. I hesitate to say the at least the scene that was the most powerful for me, just from an acting perspective, was also him and his childhood home. But as far as like for the sake of variety, I will say my other favorite scene was the scene that he spent with the prostitute, the first one that is able to to treat him like a normal human being, and then gives him like as a catharsis experience. I thought that was like a very powerfully emotional scene, and I thought it was done very well for what it was.
You and me have selected the exact same thing. That's exactly what I was gonna say. I will just add that once again we're seeing a different type of pain. Before he's kicked out of his house and took down to Mexico, I believe he says something along the lines of, "Who's gonna love me? Who's ever gonna love me?"
Oh my goodness, that broke my heart.
I want to be a man again. And he's dealing with that is just so difficult, and so that scene he's sobbing. He's crying during this version of lovemaking, and it's so powerful. So I'm with your choice. Chad, what about yours?
It's hard describing anything that happened in this movie as best scene. I feel like it's different shades of awful things that happen, but well done.
Yeah.
But I'm going with the wheelchair fight scene. It's pathetic. It's sad. And it's probably the lowest point of Ron's life. And it's the linchpin of the recovery. It's where he starts his redemption angle. So for me, I think just bearing your soul and saying, I got in a fight after getting kicked out of Mexico in a wheelchair with another paraplegic.
You just said
who killed more babies.
You just said the wheelchair fight. And if you just say the wheelchair fight, that sounds funny. But it was so just like dark and yeah, it was the Dwayne the Rock Johnson rock bottom.
Yes.
Best wardrobe or makeup moment. You have one there, Chad?
Tom Cruise is a handsome guy. We talked about him coming off of Top Gun. So I think overall, just particularly at the club when he passes out, it's impressive how ugly they managed to make Tom Cruise. The mustache did him no favors at all.
Yeah.
But the ragged, thin hair and everything like that. So kudos to the makeup department for that.
Somebody post-Vietnam said, this is what we're going to look like. And people listened to him. In terms of the mustache and the long hair and the bandana. Go ahead and give me the Vietnam War veteran. That'll be $4 at the barbershop. Thank you. And like that's it, especially on him, who we know has this kind of all-American look, especially off of Top Gun and Cocktail, all these movies as a hot young stallion, and then we get this. They really make it. They age him up really well. For me, my best wardrobe or makeup moment is actually it's a hair moment. I think it's really unfair to say the redeeming thing of Keira Sedgwick, but her hair is just so very
on point.
That's the thing that I was like, either that was your hair or your hair is just perfect. That curly hair, big puffy volume, big beautiful gorgeous hair. That's all I'll say.
Made you want to take a nap in it, no doubt.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think the different flavors of the veteran aesthetic, as you mentioned, were pretty well done because especially even with Ronnie, but also with all the other veterans that were portrayed in the movie. As Ronnie goes from like long hair, almost kind of mullet aesthetic whenever he goes and sees Donna for the first time in New York or in in the city. And then, all the way to, as he was described on the floor in the bar, the kind of really scraggly, ugly, as as you said, it's difficult to make Tom Cruise look ugly, and it was very effectively done.
They did it.
They did it. It was, but just as kind of like an overarching theme, I will say just like the transition of costuming that was done, because you cover a really wide era of time in this movie, going all the way from Ronnie's childhood, which I guess presumably would have been the 50s, early 60s, going into his his enlistment in the 60s, and people wearing the quintessential goofy Back to the Future s clothing that people were wearing at the time. And that's what it made me think of Biff and his stupid friends and the soda fountain, reading the Playboy. They were literally doing the same thing. They were like reading a Playboy in that movie. But anyways, And then the transition all the way to like the 70s era and being able to capture so many different like pieces of Americana, the hippies and beatniks and protesters and Black Power movement and everything that was captured, I thought was done. There wasn't anything that stood out to me as out of place or poorly done. So I think just like kudos to all of it.
Yeah, well, if it's so good that it's like not noticeable and that's for the right reason, like that means mission accomplished.
Yeah.
All right, you got to change one thing about this movie. What do you do? Change one thing.
So something that I noticed about the movie, and I think this was done. I'm sure there was a strategic reason why this was done with the film adaptation of Ron Kovac's actual life, is that the pacing of the transition of the scenes isn't my favorite. Because there are some scenes where one scene to another, it'll be a lapse of one day or a few days or a week. And then there are some scenes where you'll transition, and just based on a wardrobe change or the fact that Ronnie or another character has longer hair or facial hair, all of a sudden you have to understand that like a significant amount of time has elapsed. And so I think you're able to get the full picture of Ronnie's life, but there's a certain abruptness that kind of was a little jarring, and I had to adjust myself every time a time skip happened, and try to kind of put myself in a new headspace to adjust to the version of Ronnie that I was about to get, because it was like noticeable that it was going to be somebody different just because of like these really abrupt costume changes and scenery changes, and it was just something that I think some better transition of some intermediate scenes where you see like maybe some kind of transitory behavior or transition in his appearance that kind of bridges those gaps would have made it a little bit smoother for me. But I understand why they did it the way they did. At the same time, it would have made the movie excessively long if they fit every chapter of his life. And I think they got the sweet spots, but it was just something that kind of jarred me a little bit.
You know what? That's a good point. As I think they spent a perfect amount of time in each of the places they spent, but getting from one period to the next period was sometimes rushed, or if you looked away, you didn't know if it was one day or if it was 1 year.
Exactly.
Yep, yeah. I'm with you. I think there was another issue. I had that same issue with the Adjustment Bureau at the beginning of this year.
Yeah.
Chad, what about your change one thing?
We talked about it earlier, and it sounds like the scene didn't land with anyone. So if we've got 3 people in here that can agree on something here, remove the guys dressed as Native Americans in the middle of his speech. Like, why do you need that non sequitur in the middle of everything else? You've got enough here, Oliver Stone.
Yeah.
Maybe that was his personal band soapbox that he needed to throw in, but you've got enough, and it detracted from a very important moment.
Yeah, I second it then. For me, I would like to actually, this is a swap. This is a switch. I want Tom Berenger, who plays the recruitment Marine. I want him in the role of the commanding officer who essentially is telling Kovic to like sweep the friendly fire under the rug. Like that didn't happen. That's what I want to do. I just want to swap those two. I'm not changing the movie that much. I'm just changing who is where. That's mine.
Right.
All right, and then we'll finish our superlatives. We'll finish our superlatives with Chad. What is your best quote?
I had a mother. I had a father. Things that made sense. Do you remember things that made sense? Things you could count on before we all got so lost? What are we gonna do, Charlie? What am I gonna do?
Oh, wow, and the killer delivery, too. It's a good quote. For me, it was actually referenced by Andres just minutes ago, referencing when he comes home. His dad says, put a wider doorway in. I put a shower for you, too. You can get in here pretty easy. Oh, and I put some handles on the toilet for you. Let me show you this new stuff I bought for the other room. That's the quote, because that's the best portrayal that dad can give to Ronnie as "I love you, son." This is how dad's communicating. Like, this is love from dad. I have taken these steps. I have done this for you. He's breaking down and crying in that scene.
Yeah, that was touching.
Yeah, touching. Andres, you have a best quote? One you remember?
So I will say the scene where Mr. Kovic is bringing Ronnie to bed after he's had his outburst and fought with his mother in the house and woken up all the neighbors, when he's just bawling his eyes out, talking about all of his fears and of dying alone. And being loveless because of his sexual dysfunction and things like that. The things that he said is like, nobody will love me. That was probably kind of the line that was like the most jarring and impactful to me.
I'm proud of the maturity of this podcast for no one saying penis, big
penis.
effing erect penis.
Yeah. Listeners at home, I think, know the score.
Yes, we all pretended, and we picked very impactful and meaningful things, but it was also that one.
Oh man, yeah.
That was the funniest scene. How about that?
We didn't have to bring it up, but I'm glad you did. Let's rate and recommend this. Lowest being 0.5 stars, highest being 5 stars. How would you rate this movie, Andres?
I would say between a 4 and a 4.5 out of because as far as a war movie and as far as an anti-war movie and just a piece of cinema and the culmination of writing and acting and everything that was put together for this film was really there isn't anything that's stand out bad or off-putting about it. And on top of that, there are some, elements of it that are actually really fantastic. And I will say there's something that's really enjoyable. You take something away from it that I think it deserves to be at a high bracket. And out of habit, I don't believe in giving anything 5 stars, so I will say 4.5.
Oh, that's interesting, because that's the exact attitude I came into when I started with the Retro Movie Roundtable, is how difficult it would be to ever give a 5 star. And I did. Detail-oriented listeners will know that I did that once, but you'll have to figure out which one it was. Chad.
So this is the part where I get to be a troglodyte. I'm giving it 2 stars. I did not enjoy this movie. I think it's really important. I think it's exceptionally well done. That doesn't mean I like it. And I have a really, really tough time recommending this to someone who isn't a diehard Oliver Stone fan. Oliver Stone is someone, he has more misses than hits with me. So, technically sound, technically brilliant, lighting, great. But personal opinion, 2 stars, didn't like it.
Awesome. That's exactly how you feel about this movie. And I came in with just as this movie by itself. And knowing nothing about it, I actually settled on 4.5 myself.
Wow.
And I settled on it at 4.5 because I think that knowing that it's biographical is really interesting. The point of the movie, if it's under that war/anti-war, and this is an anti-war movie, and we know what is meant to come out of your viewing of this. And I think this is a movie where, like, there wasn't much of this movie that makes you feel good. The artist is giving you something to feel. Being able to experience what this movie gave me, there were some things that I thought Kira Sedgwick, I thought that particular part of the movie was, I'm not going to say unnecessary, but considering it didn't lead to much, and I think its main point was to show his disillusionment with what would happen afterwards. It was maybe not important to include. I also think that while the first 28 minutes of the movie were well done, that could have been the first 5 minutes. Didn't have to break that 2-hour mark, it didn't have to be 2:24. It was just a little too long for my taste. But otherwise, as far as what I think the goal of the movie was meant to, like, if you're the watcher, and you're hearing Tom Cruise's character. Love it or leave it, love it or leave it. He's that character first, and then what he turns into. I think maybe that journey of where he started and where he finishes is something that I would rate high and would recommend as well. I'm glad that we took the time to watch it all, but we need to start thinking about next week and the movie selection for then. Chad, can you help me pick out our movie for next time?
And now for something completely different.
And now, that's right. Now for something completely different. Option 1, Monty Python's Life of Bryan from 1979. Born on the original Christmas in the stable just next to Jesus Christ, Bryan of Nazareth spends his life being mistaken for a Messiah. Option 2, Monty Python and the Holy Grail from 1975. King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table embark on a surreal, low-budget search for the Holy Grail, encountering many very silly obstacles. And option 3, Monty Python's The Meaning of Life from 1980. The Monty Python comedy team takes a look at life in all of its stages in their own uniquely silly way. Chad, what option are we going to go
with? Just the tonal shift from
pain, this movie.
Pain. And now for something completely different, Monty Python. Yeah, we're going to laugh. We need to laugh. So the best way to laugh is to hit Monty Python and the Holy Grail 1975. Cannot wait.
Yeah, that sounds good. We need to recover a little bit after this. All right. Well, hey, Andres, thank you. This was an awesome suggestion. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I had a lot of fun.
And I did too. Regardless of where our ratings landed, I'm glad we took the time. And
hey, I did too. I love trying new things.
And thank you, all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a like on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at movie_retro. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Producing and providing this podcast is fun, but not free. We invite you to support the show at our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/retromovieroundtable. Any contribution is much appreciated and will go towards making the show better for you, the listeners. As always, thanks for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Chad?
War. War never changes.